Dillon Brooks, is he being scapegoated? There was a report that came out that the Grizzlies won't bring him back under any circumstances. His agent combated that and said, you know what, this is, it was foolishness. Basically, I'm paraphrasing here. And you had a lot of people respond. JJ had a passionate response to this. Under any circumstances probably is a bit crude language, I will say. Dillon Brooks, offensively, he's horrid. He's an elite defensive player. I do think he is an elite defensive player. He is an elite defensive wing.
Elite on
for
ball.
Sure. Yes, permanent defender. I do think Dillon Brooks
fouls like shit.
Is kind of being scapegoated here. I think the Grizzlies have more problems than just his offensive ineptitude. You look at the playoff series that we just witnessed. Brooks was horrible.
Guy.
I'm actually starving. I haven't eaten a solid meal today. I needed this.
Athletic Greens. Damn, bro. Athletic Greens.
Yeah, bro. I folded. I didn't have my normal routine today.
David Roddy shot 30% from three this series, and we're not expecting much from David Roddy. Tyus Jones, the best backup point guard in the NBA, averaged 5 points, 4 assists, shot 30% from the field and 16% from three. Jaren Jackson Jr. averaged 18. He shot 28% from three. Desmond Bane, a usual sharpshooter, shot 32% from three, but he averaged 23.5 points per game. I'll excuse it.
He was also really good games 5 and 6.
And John Moran,
4 and 5.
He shot 40% from three in a series. But you look at John Moran, in game 3, he shot 6% from three. Every other game combined, he shot 7 for 21, 33%. Game 3, he hit a flurry of threes that just went in, but they were leaving him wide open.
That's not a body shit.
We're saying Ja, I'm sorry?
Ja.
Yeah, no, he did shoot the ball well. He did.
One game, game 3. Their biggest issue is what I've been saying all year long. They have a bottom 20 half-court offense, and when you have a non-shooter like Dillon Brooks on your team, surrounded by 2 other non-shooters, and Ja Morant, usually Steven Adams or Xavier Tillman, and Jaren Jackson is like a half a shooter because he's very inconsistent, it's going to make for some ugly offensive basketball. And Dillon Brooks just so happens to be the worst shooter among all these guys that takes the most shots, so he's the one that gets the most blame in this. I do think that he talked too much. He poked the bear. But that was a culture the Grizzlies have been setting. John Morant saying we're fine in the West. Their star player coming out and saying early, putting the West on notice early for them to have a target on their back. Desmond Bane guaranteeing a win. I think this team just likes to trash talk. And Dillon Brooks being a part of it, fed into it, probably the leader of it. But this is who he is. This is the chip he has on his shoulder. And just like when we had the Embiid and Jokic topic, and you talked about Embiid's origins and where he came from, we also got to acknowledge that with Dillon Brooks. This is somebody that he has a short wingspan, a wingspan shorter than his height. He's he was the 45th pick in the NBA draft in 2017. He was not supposed to be starting on one of the best teams in any conference, and he's been able to make it this far because of his competitive edge. I do think that what he's realized in all of this is that when you really try to become the villain and fully embrace a heel-like role, very quickly you will learn to understand that that's not what you really want to do. I think Dillon Brooks is going to learn from this, and I'm going to bank on his work ethic that's taken him up to this point to continue to shine, and I think he will get an opportunity within the team, and he'll be more calm offensively. I think it's going to take the right coach to make him more calm offensively. If he can pick his spots and know when to pass, know when to shoot, and not be so trigger happy, he can be one of the better productive glue guys we have in this league.
I think what you're getting at is that Dillon Brooks crossed the line. But now, I don't think it was Taylor Jenkins enabling him to jack up 12 shots a game. It was the Grizzlies' offense. You started this off by saying they have a lot of issues, and what it starts is the roster construction. Zach Kleiman, the front office, is not a team that's going to take a lot of big-time moves. They didn't make a big-time swing for KD. They're not going to part ways with a lot of these really good young players because they're trying to accumulate as much young talent as they can. So moving on from Dillon Brooks is a way for them to reset and find a starting small forward who gives them that elite two, at least strong, reliable two-way player they can count on. Dillon Brooks got to a point where he was more damaging than helpful in the playoffs, and that's a second straight year. Now, at 27 years old, he's still a good player. He's still one of the most versatile players in the league. Not guarding LeBron James, but generally speaking, at 27, he's going to be better. 2 years ago in the playoffs, the guy dropped 25 points in a 5-game series versus Utah. when he gets hot offensively, which is rare, but he can knock down shots at an average rate. He is a pretty valuable offensive player. And more importantly, he's a culture piece, right? The Grizzlies extended that grit and grind dogma with Dillon Brooks being at the forefront as that connector that got these young guys to develop. And he inspired the belief in a team that became a 56-win squad in the regular season. He's a huge player. But the problem in Memphis is that, like I said before, they need to find some complementary players to play off of Ja. I think what makes Ja Moran a top 5 point guard is him overcoming their lack of spacing, right? And they can muddy things up with elite defensive and offensive rebounding, but ultimately in the playoff crucible, when the game slows down, Steven Adams has gained this PCL injury. You need more spacing, guys that are going to be able to complement him, taking some of the onus off of his plate to create constantly, because he's a player with a play style that's not going to age well. So when you look at this squad, I feel like what's held back many teams in the past, these hyper-athletic guards, Russell Westbrook's a great example, you need to find the number 2. Desmond Bane on a great regular season team is a fine number 2. But in the playoffs, he's more of a third wheel. Jaren Jackson is a defensive player of the year, and a rightful one at that. But Jaren Jackson, much like Bam Adebayo, is not a 2A. He's a 3A. And I think if you can find yourself that number 2, sort of what the Bulls got in Jimmy Butler, which is much easier said than done, everything opens up for this Memphis team. But until they find that number 2, they're going to run into the same exact issue. I think the end game here, what they have to attack, is one of these drafts and really go out on a swing with one of these young prospects. They tried that with Zaire Williams. He didn't play this year. He was injured most of the year. So now next year, Zaire is going to be a 21-year-old sophomore with really no experience, and he's a 27% three-point shooter. Is that the starting small forward you're going to bank on? Probably not, though you invested a top 10 pick into him.
It was a horrible pick.
It was not a horrible pick. I don't know.
At the time, it was a horrible pick.
It was a reach in the draft.
It was a big reach.
It was.
He was
a
horrible. He
first-round
was
talent.
horrible at Stanford. They
Yes.
banked on his high school resume more so than college, because college he was shit.
But he was a top 20 prospect in the class.
He was a top 20 prospect, but I remember me and Rev talking about it. Zaire Williams had the potential, but he was a high school player. In college, he was garbage. He wasn't a consistent shooter. He was a bad defender. He was a complete negative player in college.
It was
You know what?
I had my small forward rankings that year, and I had guys like Trey Murphy, Herb Jones clear over him.
Yeah, I agree with Trey Murphy. But here's the thing.
And they could have got Trey Murphy if they didn't trade up to the pick.
Don't say that. They need to take a swing on this year's draft. And I've looked at a couple of different wins. We can get into this in a
Here
different
comes
discussion.
your Maxwell Lewis agenda.
No, I'm not
for
going to
shit.
do it here. But they do need to find this young wing fast. Because Ja, I consider this a Ja Morant fan, peaked earlier than most players. And like I said before, until he develops a mid-range game like a De'Aaron Fox, when he is reliant and more so hell-bent on attacking the rim, he's going to have that reckless abandon for his body. So they need to pick this thing up quicker than we all expect. Because I don't think this window for the Grizzlies is as wide and large as everybody's made out to.
Put your
It's not.
fucking chocolate back on, bro.
But it's also
Your feet are kicking my ass. They're kicking my ass. I'm looking under the table. I'm like, bro, whose shoes are off right now? You're punching me,
My
bro.
shoes been off, bro.
Nah, bro. I'm just getting punched nonstop. Thank you.
Should have passed
shoes
it back.
over
I look
there.
at the Grizzlies though. You had Adams. You had Adams and Clark injured for the playoff series.
Don't fucking touch me. Don't.
But what we don't talk about enough is how the Grizzlies let DeAnthony Melton walk
Facts.
and Kyle Anderson. Talk about Kyle Anderson, who was a great player for the Timberwolves this year, and DeAnthony Melton, who has been a great player for the Sixers. You know, you have Melton and Kyle Anderson on the Grizzlies. It's a different team, and you can roll out different lineups. And not keeping those two was a huge loss.
Think so though? It was
I
still
do.
top 3
It
seed.
wasn't a huge loss.
It was a huge loss.
Well, Melton obviously was a great defender.
Melton
for
wasn't playing that
Philadelphia.
You know
much.
what? Melton's shooting.
That's because they had 2 guards
I
already.
think-
But in the
I
playoffs
think
the year
Grizzlies-
before, Melton was not shooting well.
I think Grizzlies would have benefited a lot instead of having Aldama minutes, had Kyle Anderson minutes.
It's okay.
You don't think so? Instead of Tyus Jones minutes, let's throw out Melton out there because Tyus Jones was shit in this.
Aldama was one of the few that was actually
Wait,
knocking down
but Melton
shots.
wasn't that good
He was wide
against
open.
Minnesota, if I'm
No.
not mistaken. He wasn't that good
Nah,
against
he
Minnesota.
wasn't. But Melton's been good for the Sixers, and he's
Exactly, in a new
he's a
environment.
foundation.
defensive
Where he's
player.
more
He's a
needed.
defensive pest. That's what he is.
He
I
is
just
more
think-
needed with them because they don't have that many guards.
Slow-mo, too, was a better fit serving the Timberwolves.
He was great with the Grizzlies too, though.
He was good.
He's better. He's better.
Taylor
for
Jenkins
Minnesota.
cut down his minutes, and Taylor Jenkins is also somebody who has not adjusted in the playoffs. You talk about Budenholzer. Taylor Jenkins does not adjust in the playoffs either.
I think that's more because of his team. Like,
I do think they definitely missed Slow-mo as a leader, though. They missed, like, he could have been.
I think
that
a lot
locker
of
room. He was a
Memphis's
huge part of the culture.
issues is internal. In terms of the Dillon Brooks things, I don't feel bad because he kind of put it on himself. Calling LeBron old, talking shit. Being that kind of villain throughout the season, and then playing victim.
Till they give me 40.
I don't know. I'm not gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, he's a great defender, but that defense does not offset his bad offensive play. He's not good offensively. He cannot play make. He's not a good ball handler. He cannot shoot. He takes horrible shots that kind of stop the offense. The great defense does not equate. It does not offset that. So I think they do need to upgrade at the 3. I think we've all known that. Draymond Green was right yet again, unfortunately.
Dynasty starts after you.
Yep, and he's cooking. I do think a 3 would be huge. I wish they would have pulled the trigger on Mikal Bridges or OG. That would have been the perfect wing for them. But internally, Ja, Bane, Jaren, they got to get better. Do they have to bring another prospect in? Absolutely, 100%. But those 3 guys got to get better. Steven Adams is a guy who is good for them throughout the regular season, but that's a playoff guy that they may need to move. He's a big contract. Not big, but he's a good contract. That's somebody they need to start moving away from. They need to get more shooters. That's the main issue. But I think the big 3 of Jaren, Bane, and Ja just has to get better internally. Ja has to work on his jumper, start from the paint outwards. Desmond Bane has to continue to work on his creation, continue to work on his shot. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Keep working. Jaren also has to work on his creation, be more of a ready shooter, be more of a elite shooter. And if they keep doing that, then they can be able to build the proper necessary pieces around them. But right now, they kind of have a stagnant offense because Ja can't shoot outside the paint. Jaren Jackson is not a great three-point shooter. We had him coming out the draft. We thought he was going to be able to stretch the floor at a great rate, 40%, three-point shooter, 39. He's inconsistent with that. And then Desmond Bane sometimes looks streaky. So I think you have Dillon Brooks out there. You have Steven Adams, 2 non-shooters. That's 3 to 4 non-shooters. Jaren on a good day, yeah. But Jaren on a bad day, that's 4 non-shooters on the court at the same time. So
Jaren can kind of stroke it.
Yeah, that's what I said, on a bad day.
Yeah.
So he's inconsistent with it. So the construction of the roster is great for the regular season. But their point is, in the playoffs, we have to push this pace. We have to get far. They made it to the second round. They've made consistent improvement. But then this year, they reached a stop. They played LeBron and AD, who's an awful matchup for them, and they ended up losing in 6 games. Realistically, 5. That game 6 doesn't count. But I think realistically, they just have to continue to build this roster.
40-ball race is a W that they got?
Yes.
So Jaren Jackson last 3 seasons, this past season, 36% from 3, 35.5 rounded up 36. Last season, 32%. The year before that, 28% from 3.
Kind of stroke it, like I said.
Not ideal. 28 is nasty business.
Getting to 35, 36 is impressive,
But in his first 2 seasons, it was at 36% and 39%.
Oh, so he's falling off.
So he's up and down.
Uh-huh. I guess it's my turn.
It
So
is
regardless,
definitely
Dillon Brooks and a scapegoat. I think that I don't know if everyone's pointing blame at Dillon Brooks. That's the main reason that they lost. That's definitely not what I'm doing. I'm definitely looking at Dillon Brooks in, obviously I'm not an NBA player. I'm not the athlete that they are, but I'm pointing to Dillon Brooks and laughing at Dillon Brooks because, of course, he's the one that was the most vocal of all the Grizzlies players. Of course, everyone knows the quote. He's old. I poke bears. I don't respect nobody until they give me 40. So, of course, when the Lakers go and they close you out, winning by 40 points flat, of course people are going to point and make fun of you. Say, hey, you have fun over there overseas playing basketball. You're not a player that people are going to want on their NBA rosters. You look at every fan base that they're rumored to go and have and acquire Dillon Brooks or be in conversations to potentially have a landing spot for Dillon Brooks. These fans don't want Dillon Brooks near their teams because they don't want that headache. They don't want that extra chatter, that noise that comes with having Dillon Brooks on your team. But I definitely don't look at Dillon Brooks being scapegoated as the reason why the Grizzlies lost this series. Sure, you might have given the Lakers more motivation than they're already playing with. You could look to that being a reason why, sure, but in the grand scheme of things, they don't have shooting, they lack size, and defensively, they played really great defensively. That's the one thing you could look at this series and say, hey, that was their strong point. But offensively, that's been an issue all season long. If Ja wasn't getting it going, who was already hampered with a hand injury too, that's not something that people really bring up all too often. He played the entire series very visibly injured. Desmond Bane, who had his moments of being really good, had his moments of being an all right basketball player, and Jaren Jackson, who was supposed to be, quote-unquote, the best defensive player in this series because he won Defensive Player of the Year, got outmatched in his own game, where Anthony Davis was simply just better than him defensively. So it's clear that just the Grizzlies have deficiencies. They need some extra depth. they needed to be healthy, really, because of course Steven Adams, Brandon Clark getting injured and not being able to play in the postseason put them at a deficit, especially against Anthony Davis, who just was in a different mode.